Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Wynna Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Secondary schools have been ordered to suspend in-class lessons because of COVID. A one-year-old girl is among several people feared to have contracted COVID in a Kwai Chung building. And children as young as 5 can receive Sinovac jabs from tomorrow. Secondary schools have been ordered to suspend face-to-face classes as silent transmissions and untraceable COVID cases triggered fresh concerns. Principals welcomed the move, with some saying they have already switched to online lessons. Macy Mock reports.
Just days after primary schools and kindergartens suspended on-campus learning amid a growing COVID threat, secondary schools will follow suit. They were instructed to stop all campus activities on or before Monday until the end of the Lunar New Year holidays. But Form 6 students can return to school for half a day to prepare for their university entrance exam. The order came after students in at least 7 secondary schools were confirmed to be infected with COVID or tested preliminary positive. The Education Bureau warned of silent transmissions and untraceable cases. Principals have made plans to switch to online learning, which some say it's not ideal.
We understand that online lesson is not the best way for learning. However, under these circumstances, and we understand that online lesson is unavoidable. But at the same time, we're also concerned about students' mental state. So we hope that through closer supervision and also monitoring, that we will understand students need a little bit more, so we can take immediate action if necessary.
John Siu, principal of the Tuen Mun Catholic Secondary School, said online classes began this week as parents were concerned after infections in the district surged. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
There are worries that a residential building in Kwai Chung has become a new COVID hotspot after people in at least 7 flats tested preliminary positive. And health authorities believe a woman living in Mei Fu caught the virus from 2 students who walked past her in an MTR station. After spending a night in lockdown, residents of Yat Kwai House in Kwai Chung Estate were released early this morning. But there was bad news. Several of their neighbors tested preliminary positive overnight. Health authorities said cases were detected in at least 7 units on different floors and sections of the building. One suspected case is a 1-year-old girl who was taken to visit her grandmother. Earlier this week, the government confirmed that a 79-year-old retiree and a 53-year-old Cathay Pacific cargo handler who lived in the estate were infected. How the virus made its way there remains a mystery.
Taking the lift, in the rubbish and throwing rubbish, or staying in the lobby, or they chat with the neighbors, or they use the common facilities such as the mailbox and other door knocks and some other, or they even stayed outside or inside the building nearby. Of course, we have to exclude whether there are some environmental factors such as vertical, horizontal transmission that may explain.
The authorities, meanwhile, believe they might have finally figured out how a 26-year-old kindergarten teacher living in Mei Fu San Chun contracted the virus. Her genome sequencing results match those of a woman who returned from Pakistan and quarantined at the Silka Seaview Hotel in December. Officials say the woman's 2 sons, who attend Delia Memorial School Broadway in Mei Fu, walked in the same MTR tunnel as the kindergarten teacher on January 14th, 9 seconds apart.
This is the only possible common path we could find at this moment.
Hong Kong saw 14 confirmed cases today, 10 of which were locally transmitted. There were also dozens of preliminary positive cases, several of which are untraceable. Children aged 5 to 11 have to go to special centers after the Lunar New Year for BioNTech jabs. But those who choose Sinovac can be vaccinated from tomorrow. Johanna Chan reports.
As Hong Kong's mass vaccination program approaches its first anniversary, the authorities have lowered the age threshold. From tomorrow, children aged 5 to 11 will be able to get Sinovac jabs to help protect them against COVID. Parents can book a slot from 8 a.m. before taking their child to a community vaccination center or a private clinic where they have to provide written consent. Like adults, children are recommended to get their second jab 28 days later. BioNTech shots for children can be administered only at vaccination centers catering to them. 5 to 11-year-olds can get jabs at the Hong Kong Children's Hospital in Kowloon City and the Yuen Chau Kok Sports Center, starting on February 16th. Or go to Gleneagles Hospital in Wong Chuk Hang from the 24th. Parents can start booking BioNTech shots for their children on February 9th. The second dose should be administered at least 12 weeks later. Experts have recommended that children be injected in their thigh with a smaller dose of BioNTech. As of yesterday, nearly 77% of Hong Kong's population, or 5.18 million people, had their first shots. Those in the 12 to 19 age group comprise 7% of people receiving the first dose. Johanna Chan, HKIBC.
COVID outbreaks on the mainland have slowed down with only 43 new cases yesterday. Henan province reported 24 infections, with more than a dozen in Tianjin and 2 in Zhuhai. Beijing had 3 cases compared with just 1 on Tuesday. 2 patients are neighbors and colleagues at a cold chain logistics warehouse. With the Winter Olympics around the corner, residents in the capital were urged to avoid gatherings. The aviation regulator, meanwhile, is suspending 6 more flights from the United States, taking the number of cancellations to almost 100 this year. Overseas, all measures imposed to combat Omicron are expected to end in Britain starting next week. But Germany and Japan are tightening restrictions as infections surge. Sarah Wong reports.
Authorities in Japan are not taking any chances with Omicron following a record daily uptake of over 41,000 cases. Osaka and nearby regions may join Tokyo and shorten the opening hours of restaurants and bars. Germany reported a new high of 133,000 infections, with Omicron accounting for more than 70% of the cases. Berlin has tightened curbs on the hospitality sector, with lawmakers mulling a vaccine mandate. It's a different story in Britain, which plans to end all COVID measures from next week. That means Britons can return to their office and don't need to wear masks in public. Daily average cases in Britain fell to 92,000 for the past week.
The data shows that Omicron is in retreat. We cannot eradicate this virus and its future variants. Instead, we must learn to live with COVID in the same way that we've learned to live with flu.
Thailand is resuming a quarantine-free travel program to revive its battered tourism industry. Starting on February 1st, vaccinated travelers who take a COVID test on arrival and 5 days later can skip isolation. New Zealand, which adopted one of the most cautious pandemic strategies, is also open to coexisting with the virus.
We won't stop Omicron, but we can try and slow it down so that rather than dealing with a tidal wave of cases, we work hard to keep cases as low as possible.
Meanwhile, global demand for the antiviral drug Paxlovid has far outstripped supply. The United States has enough of the Pfizer-made pills for 20 million people, but some patients were forced to go from pharmacy to pharmacy, hunting for the medicine. Sarah Wong, HKIBC.
In other news, a travel agency and a hotel face fines of more than $5 million for breaching the competition ordinance. The Competition Commission said Gray Line, run by former Travel Industry Council Chairman Michael Wu, and Tink Labs agreed to fix prices for tourist attractions and transportation tickets. The commission said this had hurt competition. The tickets were sold at 9 hotel groups, including Intercontinental Grand Stanford in 2016 and 2017. The commission recommended that the competition tribunal fine Gray Line nearly $4.2 million and Intercontinental Grand Stanford $1.6 million. It also wants Wu banned from being a director for 3 years. The Education University has ceased to recognize its student union, citing managerial problems. The university said the provisional body that has been running the union for 4 years is not recognized by students and is not representative. The institution added that it understood that as the union has been unable to form a cabinet, it would mean that the provisional body would continue to be in charge. While an overhaul of student union operations is conducted, membership fees will not be collected. The university will look after the union's funds of $9 million on a temporary basis. And coming up after the break. Inflation is on the rise in Hong Kong, with virtually everything costing more than a year ago.